What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Fast. Today, let's get started with Aljamain Sterling shares theory on why Umar hasn't received UFC title fight against Merab Dvalishvili. Aljamain Sterling believes Umar Nurmagomedov will need to prove just how good he is based on skill, not his last name. Nurmagomedov scored his biggest win to date when he defeated Cory Sandhagen back in August. While the win was impressive, the rising 135-pounder claims bantamweight champion Merab Dvalishvili is playing games when it comes to a title fight between the two. I'm not saying he's not good. I love Umar. I think Umar is a great guy, but facts are the facts. I don't care what your cousin has done. That does not have any bearing on what you have done for the sport. You've got to cut your teeth in this game, not riding the coattails of your family's merit. I always say if I have kids, I want to make sure they're not riding off the coattails of what I do or have done in my life. I want to make sure they're out there. They're being go-getters. I think anyone with any type of real self-worth would want to do that. Earn their keep. You don't want to be feeling like the person who's just here because you were handed an invite versus actually earning to be at the table. Earn your seat at the table. Paul Craig made a statement to Bo Nickal. Craig and Nickal will share the octagon inside the world-famous Madison Square Garden in New York City. The middleweight bout will be featured on the UFC 309 main card. While Nickal is a massive betting favorite going into this fight, Craig has been known to pull off his share of upsets, usually via submission. Paul Craig got a chance to speak with Michael Bisping and the TNT Sports crew ahead of UFC 309. During the chat, Craig explained why it would be a mistake for Bo Nickal to grapple with him on the ground. I don't believe he's going to try to take me down. When you think about wrestling as our sport, their whole game plan is to pin you on your back. That's a bad situation to put me in. If you spend 15 minutes with me laying on my back, there's a very good chance I'm catching a submission. There's few men who have been in the octagon with me and put me in that position and survived. Bo Nickal, I don't believe has experience, but I've said that a few times in my career. Craig is a savvy 26-fight veteran with 13 submission wins on his resume. He could make things interesting once the fight gets to the ground, but he will need to withstand Nickal's stand-up barrage as well. Tom Aspinall shares prediction for UFC 309 co-main event between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Interim UFC heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall recently provided predictions for this weekend's UFC 309 pay-per-view. Since his division's undisputed belt will be on the line in the main event, the English fighter will be keeping a close eye on the evening's headlining bout. Still, Aspinall will also be watching the entire card, especially the co-main event fight, a rematch between former UFC lightweight champion Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. I'm gonna go for Chris Weidman. Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig. I think it's a tough fight, but I'm gonna take the person that I know best, and I'm gonna take Paul Craig in that one. Charles Oliveira versus Mike Chandler. I'm gonna go Charles. He did it once. He can do it again. John Jones, Stipe Miocic. I think you'll never know at heavyweight, but I'm gonna give the edge to John Jones. I think John Jones is gonna take it via a late stoppage. Dana White heaps praise on Khamzat Chimaev, wants to see UFC title fight in USA. Chimaev positioned himself in title contention when he ran through former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker for a first-round submission at UFC 308. The UFC CEO was very impressed with Chimaev's return and anticipates him fighting for the middleweight title next year, preferably in the United States. He looked incredible. His manager was telling me before the fight that mentally, physically, and emotionally, he's the best he's ever been. He said, "I'm telling you, wait until you see him on Saturday." And he was right. This guy's never looked better, especially against the competition that he had. I'm looking forward to him getting a title fight in 2025. We'll see how this plays out here, but I want him to fight in the United States. Chimaev hasn't competed in the USA since submitting Kevin Holland at UFC 279 in Las Vegas. Chimaev's quick finish of Whittaker got the attention of UFC middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis, who said he'd rather defend his title against the unbeaten sensation over a rematch with Sean Strickland. The promotion is yet to announce du Plessis' next title fight, but his head coach Morn Visser said the plan is to compete at UFC 312 in Sydney. Daniel Cormier reveals Stipe Miocic was heated backstage following press conference with Jon Jones. According to UFC commentator Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic was pretty frustrated after his face-off with Jon Jones. For most of the build to UFC 309, things have been cordial between the two heavyweights. However, things have taken a turn in the last few weeks. Jon Jones began slamming Stipe Miocic on social media, following a comment made by the latter in a preview video released by the UFC. Furthermore, things become more tense following yesterday's press conference. Miocic seemed cool and also confused by what Jones was mentioning, but it also apparently upset him backstage. That's according to UFC commentator Daniel Cormier, who discussed the situation in a recent interview with MMA Junkie. According to the retired fighter, Miocic didn't appreciate being accused of mentioning the champion's family. A A lot of the greats do take anything for motivation, he likes it. He operates well in that too. He operated well in our series of fights and he doesn't mind it. We just talked on the weigh-in show and he spoke about it like it was true. He didn't make this up. He said, "I heard Stipe say it, I'm not lying." Stipe Miocic is mad, you can tell. When he got off the stage yesterday at the press conference, John said, "Don't talk about my children," and Stipe goes, "I did not talk about your kids." He was shaking his head. Then he went off stage, he ripped his mic off and told UFC Embedded stop filming. He was so mad and upset. Cory Sandhagen believes overestimating Umar Nurmagomedov's wrestling cost him. During a recent appearance on the Jackson podcast, he recapped the fight and where he believes he went wrong in his preparations. Sandhagen was able to compete with Nurmagomedov in the grappling exchanges after putting a lot of time into his wrestling throughout his training camp. However, as a result, he encountered a problem that many fighters have when going up against a wrestling specialist. In his opinion, he became so focused on this aspect of the fight that it negatively impacted his striking, which is where you'd imagine him to hold an advantage in this matchup. He found that grappling with his opponent wasn't the issue that he had, taking advantage of the time they spent standing was. Cory was happy to learn from this fight, but admitted that the narrative surrounding his opponent's dominant grappling played a major factor inside the octagon. "I grappled a ton. I was wrestling a lot. Just the normal man. Like I really thought that I would have a little bit more of an edge in the striking, but should have done a little bit more striking and a little bit less wrestling. Because the wrestling, I kind of overestimated him big time on that. Everyone talks about how strong the Dagestani guys are and stuff, and I had a little bit of that swirling around in my head, so I overdid that, I think, a little bit." It appears Conor McGregor's return will be pushed back even longer than expected. McGregor was expected to make his highly anticipated comeback against Michael Chandler at UFC 303 in June, but a broken pinky toe forced him out of the bout. Chandler, who had already exercised plenty of patience waiting for McGregor, after they filmed season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter, finally decided to move on. Chandler may have moved on, but he still has McGregor in his sights. Dana White doesn't rule out the possibility of a McGregor versus Chandler rebooking, but not anytime soon. That's a fun fight. I think Conor and Chandler both like that fight. When Conor comes back, which I see being sometime the later part of next year, we'll see where everybody's at and what's going on, and we'll figure out who faces Conor. That's why everybody was so excited about it. Chandler and Conor McGregor is a fun fight. With McGregor's return continuing to be delayed, many question if he'll ever fight again. Based on his conversations with McGregor, the UFC CEO confirms that the Notorious still has the desire to compete, even though it's been over 3 years. It's a fact that he does want to fight next year. He and I probably talk 4 or 5 times a month. He definitely wants to come back. We'll just see. Every time I'm on here, I tell you, money. Money messes everything up. Max Holloway is open to defending his BMF title against Charles Oliveira. Upon hearing that Holloway will make a permanent move to lightweight, Oliveira told MMA Fighting that he'd be interested in facing him for the BMF title, and Holloway is more than happy to oblige. Holloway and Oliveira fought once before at featherweight in August 2015, with Holloway defeating Du Bronx by TKO less than 2 minutes into their fight due to injury. I heard Oliveira said he wanted to go for the BMF. That's pretty cool. Oliveira, I know we have some history, and I know if that fight was ever offered to me, brother, it would be an honor to share the octagon with you. You're a beast, and I can't wait. I can't wait for this fight. This fight versus Chandler is huge.